All right, well, welcome to the Trax Freight Market Report. We're going over July data today, but since we're late into August, I'm excited to hear a little bit more up-to-date information. As always, it has been an interesting month with lots to discuss, right, Steve? So we're going to dive right in.
Always interesting. Definitely.
Never a dull moment. And super excited and honored to have Mike Erickson as a guest today. So Steve, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll have Mike kind of talk through his role and what we're going to be talking through today.
Sounds great. Well, I'll introduce myself first, but I will also acknowledge it's great to have Mike join us today. We don't typically talk about the small package or parcel marketplace, so we're really excited about having Mike to talk about that as an expert. But let me go ahead and introduce myself for those that are new to the program. Steve Beda, Executive Vice President at Trax. I manage or help manage and oversee some of our larger accounts in terms of optimizing their programs. I lead all the thought leadership at Trax, as well as provide advisory services to our customers in terms of not only overall program optimization in terms of what we do in the market and in freight audit, but also how to leverage the data asset effectively in their operation. So excited to be here and talk about some of the things going on in the market, and definitely excited to have Mike. So Mike, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Joy. I'm excited to be here and help and share anything that we want to talk about today. I'm excited about it. And I'm Mike Erickson, the president of AFMS. The founder also started a company 34 years ago, and we're mostly a parcel consulting, advisory, and benchmarking company. We help some of the larger shippers in Europe and the United States and Canada with their contracts and pricing. And I'm excited today to talk about what we're seeing in the market here in August and what's happening in July, and things that are going to probably happen here in the real near future in January.
Very exciting. Well, we're so pleased to have you. It's definitely always a wild ride when we go over these numbers. So for those of you who don't know, this webinar augments the monthly freight market report that Trax puts together. It's kind of an aggregate of all the big points of supply chain data and operational data, things that supply chain leaders would need to know and be in the know about. And Steve offers his expert commentary to that as well. So we'll make sure you have a link to download, and we'll also make sure that, at the end of this webinar, you have a link to, learn more about Mike and his role and his business and all of the interesting things and great impacts that he's having on supply chain leaders as well. So let's kind of start high level. Really, we're looking at July, but we can look at a good portion now of August as well, I suppose. So Steve, as we sit and look at the kind of logistics manager index, I know we had an interesting visual this month, which was new. The LMI seems to be doing that every month. They're giving us like one extra little treat of something that's aggregating data or whatever.
It is. And they're great visuals because we all know a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Yeah. So we could talk about things. And we actually have been talking about the ebbs and flows of the pricing and capacity, especially related to transportation. But what's carried also into that equation is inventory and warehousing. So this visual, before we go into the visual, I want to make one general comment. And this comes from just talking to customers and experience. But we talk about those cycles and the duration of cycles. And that's the bit of the unknown. And so the LMI, when we look at it, we'll see what those cycles look like, the slopes, and maybe start thinking about where we're going. And then certainly the rest of this year, maybe even heading into 27. But before we go there, I always like to put a theme out for the session and what I see. And my theme and comment today is agility. And there's a reason I'm saying that. So I've been monitoring our large customers' behavior over the last several months in terms of navigating the market. And when I say navigating the market, all the things we talk about, inventory changes, warehousing, capacity issues, and a very heavy focus on transportation capacity, transportation pricing, and fuel, right? Fuel is not going in the right direction as of yesterday. I just checked. And so the reason I say the word of the day is agility is, if you can imagine, companies are attempting to navigate through these market conditions. Now, there's several things you can do about it, but one of them is on the rate side, right? Negotiating the rates or spots that are appropriately addressing concerns within specific lanes, specific situations, modes, and modalities. We'll talk about Parcel today with Mike, but the reason I say agility is important is this market requires you to have processes and data in place to be able to make rapid changes based on situations that come up. And the better you are at doing that, the more you can address situations as they arise and mitigate the issue faster and more resilient within the market itself. So agility to me is something that I've been thinking about a lot, because I've talked to a lot of customers about what they're experiencing and the number of rate changes going on, the number of spots happening. And you think about the proliferation of that change, when you multiply it out across modalities, it's quite difficult to manage from a procurement perspective, and then the trickle down effect as that goes down to the other aspects of the business. So agility is the word of the day, right? Being able to manage a market like this, change on demand, adapt, is critical. And to do that, it takes good process, good technology enablement, and good data to make those decisions. Okay. So that's my thought for the day. And Mike, you can pick up on some of those concepts and apply it to the parcel market as well when we get there. So, but let's start with the LMI. Let's take a look at a visual, because I think it's really interesting. So we've been talking about ebbs and flows of cycles. So what we're seeing on this graph going back is sort of a COVID look, and a freight recession look, and a recovery look. And now and then in the middle of all that on the right side is tariffs and Strait of Hormuz and other factors playing into the geopolitical side of it. But what's interesting about this, and I've said this in the past and I still see it, is if you look at the slope on the COVID side, on the left side, you see very, very significant slopes up and down, meaning that event occurred and there was a major reaction to it, and then there's a recovery, unfortunately caused a freight recession, right? So in other words, when you look at the dip down there, you had a lack of investment due to the freight recession, as we call it. Now you look at the right side and you start seeing a much less, a different slope. You see a less aggressive upward slope, a more reasonable slope coming back. You see a dip there, but you see it coming back, and now you see it coming back down. What's interesting about the read on this is, one, the recovery from the recession isn't happening as fast as we thought it would, meaning the capacity crunch that we saw late 25 is still happening in 26, and I think it's going to remain there for a while. So until carriers invest in meeting the capacity demand that the demand is requiring, and they've been skittish on doing that because of the freight recession. Right. So until that happens, we're going to see continued sort of constraints in the market, and the pricing, albeit has come down a bit. You can see the trend there at the end where it's sort of leveling off. The rate of change is less. It is taking some time to recover. So to me, it's all about the cycles in these things. You can look at the cycle of the wave in between 20 and 23. Then you look at the cycle of the wave from 23. We're not even on the downward slope yet, really. So that's interesting, isn't it? So that's the real sort of guesswork in where the market's going. And you add fuel to this. If we were to look at fuel, you see that as well. And that's contributing to those escalated prices. So I just wanted to make a comment on this. And I don't know, Mike, maybe you could relate it to a small package. I think the graphs look a little different because e-commerce is so in demand in the market. But I'm sure you're going to tell us a little bit about how this connects to some of the pricing and capacity requirements of Parcel. But you may just comment a little bit on this from a Parcel perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the Parcel market as well ratcheting up a lot of the pricing, the annual general rate increases and things that are really impacting shippers' budgets this year. So people are surprised that why are my shipping costs so much higher now than a year ago or 2 years ago? Things like this, the spot market rate, ocean rates are going up again, fuel surcharges. We're going to talk about all those, but there's a lot of things, and a lot of it is on the truckload, like you're mentioning here. We're seeing truckload capacity is up. We're seeing the spot market ratcheting up their indexes, which is a good indicator of where pricing is going to be in 27, and we think it's going to be much higher than it is today. So the things you're saying are spot on, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think, Joy, my message to end this little segment here on the slide is that recovery process is taking a lot longer than any of us had hoped for. We've been talking about this for some time. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is not getting any better either. The situation in the Middle East is if anything, being ratcheting up. So I see headwinds continue. There's a little leveling off there. We'll see what August looks like, but I can tell you that downward slope to balance of inventory capacity and pricing may take some time because the slopes we're slower to go up and maybe slower to come back. Okay.
Well, it's an interesting insight, Steve, because when you think about data as an asset, right, we're talking about the inside view, right? What we can control, I guess, is what's happening internally in organizations. And there's all of these, I guess, maybe the externalities are like we just saw, right? This incredible impact. And it's easy to look at the cycle, the freight recession, and then be hedging against it because we kind of have this emotional reaction to the historical or the very recent historical dynamics that have occurred. I think it just augments the need to know your data, have access to your data, normalize your data, like, because that's all you can know, right? What we can't know is the timeline. What we can't know is Strait of Hormuz, all the geopolitical events, all of that. That's out of control and unknowable, which I think makes the imperative to know your own internal systems, data, prediction cycles, all of that much more important.
That's right. And that's why I brought up agility as a theme today, because again, and this really matters if you have a proportion of your spend in small package, as Mike will cover here shortly. That's specific to a modality that is impacted differently than some other modality. So knowing the details behind that, having the information related to the impacts of that and how these graphs that we just looked at and the market conditions impact that is really, really important. So but agility really is translating into data availability, good process of management and change, and just accepting the fact that the business needs do change, sometimes on a weekly basis, and your ability to navigate through that quickly is really, really important. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I agree with you. Flexibility in today's market is critical. I mean, agility and flexibility as a company. I mean, the technology tools that are out there allow you to be flexible and be agile as the market changes, or a new carrier comes out, or some fuel prices are skyrocketing with one carrier. What can you do quickly to compensate those issues with another solution? And I think the technology that's out there today, the multi-carrier solutions, the platforms that are out there to allow you to ship with multiple carriers. I mean, a lot of companies are now going towards that because of what's going on in the parcel market, especially. Lots of options out there when you need to print labels, from price shopping, change based on rate increases or recent announcements that you weren't expecting, and you need to be able to move your freight quickly. All that's happening today, and we're seeing a lot of changes. So agility and flexibility is really, I agree, a key word.
Yeah, I think it is. And maybe this is a bit of a good segue, Mike, into if Joy allows me to do that.
I'll allow it.
Well, what's interesting, Joy, we look at macroeconomic conditions, we look at macro freight conditions. You didn't see any details breaking down that graph we just saw by modality, for instance, air freight, ocean. Every modality has its own impact and timing of percent of rate increase. I mean, we can argue that fuel is probably impacting every single mode of transport, right? That's one that's unilateral. But Mike, I think this is a good segue into the small package. And so, again, we're talking about a broad set of providers, certainly in the U.S., but even globally, that provide this less than 150 pound, 70 kg type of non-palletized freight that's going either to a commercial address or a residential address. In a lot of cases, it's going to residential as well. So maybe if we start shifting over and looking at that particular market, maybe give us some insight into what you see, what the market conditions are, and how they're impacting that specifically within the parcel market.
Yeah, great, Steve. Great segue there. And it's changing so rapidly. This timing for agility and flexibility and what's going to market is almost should have been done hopefully 2-3 months ago, because a lot of big players, the big e-commerce and retailers, that are gearing up for peak season, the holidays, they're not switching their network starting here in September. It's too close. They're not going to risk trying a new carrier and having problems service-wise. So a lot of the things that are in play now probably with them are going to stay in place till after the first of the year. But they can still work on their pricing and things midstream, not changing carriers, but changing maybe their contracts or pricing the next month or two. But you're right. The market's evolved, Steve. You're seeing ever since the post office reintroduced the DDUs, which is the last mile delivery unit, dropping off like they used to have a last mile delivery program for a lot of people out there. They took it away for a couple of years and they just reintroduced it here again recently. And now what's evolved is a lot of these small last mile delivery partners like Uni, there's so many of them here, Better Truck, SpeedX, GoBold, OnTrax, been around a while. But there's now about 7 or 8 last mile delivery partners that have really been financed well, either from international funds or private equity here. And they've become more of a cheaper alternative to the traditional, UPS and FedEx are your stalwart, you've been here forever, two of the most common companies that are out here. But what you're seeing in the parcel market now is the post office changing, last mile delivery companies changing, regional carriers are getting into the market. And another big entry, Steve, that's really upended everything, is the entry of Amazon a few months ago. I mean, Amazon has opened up their entire supply chain network for every shipper in the United States to take advantage of. That includes their truck network, their international network, their ocean network, and especially their parcel network where they pick up all your packages and deliver it. That's been a big game changer, and it's scaring the heck out of the two major carriers that have been around forever. So it's no longer a duopoly. It's really now with Amazon's entry here, you can see on the slide here on the bottom right, Amazon has got their fully integrated logistics network open to the market. It's become one of the biggest disruptors in this parcel space that we've seen in probably 20 years. Is that good or bad? I think choice, flexibility, options is excellent. Everyone's needed this. This has been on the horizon for even before COVID. I mean, they were thinking about doing this and COVID shut it down. So a lot of changes have happened, Steve, in the real quick last 4 or 5 months here, especially with the DDUs being opened up again and all the last mile delivery partners, Amazon being in the market here, the post office with their ground advantage changes and what they're doing. So I'm excited to talk about that today, some of all these parcel changes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mike. So you're right. I mean, I can personally, I work virtually, so I stare out my window every day and I can, when I'm bored, I guess I'm not bored very often, but I do look out and I see who's delivering goods to the residential market, by the way. And I see a lot of different providers out there. I see FedEx, UPS, I see DHL, and I see Amazon and a good mix, right? So choice is good. We talked earlier in an earlier session, Mike, about 3PLs and how important relationships work with your providers, in terms of capacity planning, in terms of forecasting and making sure that you're in good shape. But choice is good. And I think it, to be able to implement that in certain cases where it's needed is really important, if anything, just for backups and risk mitigation and stuff. So how does a shipper sort of figure this out with all these changes? I mean, what's the best way of deciding how I should sort of tackle this with more choice, right?
Yeah, I think each company's unique decision-making variables come into play here. You've got an executive team that's looking at strategies around which carriers to use. Is you're going to like a low-cost regional or a low-cost last-mile delivery partner, if you're a big parcel e-commerce shipper, like a big retailer that spends 100 million, 50 million, 200 million or more shipping with the traditional UPS or FedEx, and they're looking at all these options out here. And even Amazon and the other regional and the other last mile delivery partners, they've all got good and bad. And you got to evaluate, hey, is cost an important variable here? We're going to project to save this much money by using an alternative to the big two. Or is service important? Because, they've only been around a year and a half. Amazon's been just announced in May. They've only been really rolling it out to people have never used them to the full network that they're opening up their playbook here. And I think people need to evaluate service. And it's almost too early to judge how are they going to perform, especially with peak season coming up. So a lot of companies, I was on a call yesterday with a lot of companies and industry folks, and it's a little, service cost. Do you want to risk having your customers get packages delivered 8 to 10 days versus maybe 1 to 3 days or 1 to 5 days? And the post office says 2 to 5 days for the ground advantage. UPS is all more time definite, 2 to 5 days throughout the U.S. So everyone's been used to that time definite service that UPS and FedEx have established for everybody. A lot of these new players in the market, they're not quite as trusted. You don't know how they're going to play out. They're going to lose boxes. They get them damaged. It's all done through the network, like food delivery companies that you order. They're using almost like the Uber Eats and other things, where they're just people in the market out there. So you're not in uniform packages or driver outfits. You're not in the vans. Mom and pop shows up, delivers a package, take a picture. How are those packages being delivered? Are they being delivered at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning? And does that really make someone mad when someone rings your doorbell at 4 in the morning versus the traditional 8 to 5? So all that goes into play when you're really looking at which carriers to use, and price is obviously one of the big variables here. So
no, that makes sense, Mike.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. I think this price cost, if you will, versus service, transit time really is what you're saying in terms of service, right? How long does it take to get the box from A to B? Obviously, there's all kinds of optimization strategies too within that market, and consolidation, right? It's still cheaper to often ship a consolidated load if you can. But maybe, Joy, do we have a slide on some of the specifics around charges in this market? Because I know with this particular modality, Mike, the total cost of something is well beyond just the freight cost, right? Just like
one of the biggest, besides service and price is like, there's a lot of components to price. And that's one of the things we do as a company. We evaluate contracts and accessorial fees and fuel costs and all the above. So this is just an example, I think, that your viewers would love to see. This is a blend of UPS and FedEx's base rates, when this is public information. They've gone from the rate increase. You can see the change, the services like the DAS and the residential fees and the oversized fees. Steve, how many accessorial fees there are now with UPS and FedEx? How many do you think are out there today, right now?
My guess is you're going to tell me a lot.
Well, a lot is not good enough. I mean, it's over 100. Each of these carriers have introduced over the years, and we're not talking like 40 years ago, but all in about the last 5 to 10 years, they have doubled the accessorial fees out there, like fees that were never even around, like this top one here. This is the most crazy one out here. Steve, 41,000 zip codes in the United States. Before, they would deliver just for a residential fee of the $3, $5, whatever it may be. UPS, FedEx, On Track, all the regional carriers. But now what they did is they looked at these zip codes. Oh, this costs a little bit more to get to. Here's a way for us to make some money. They are now charging, like it says on here, from $4.45 all the way up to like $16 to certain zip codes. 2/3 of all the zip codes in the United States are now getting a fee based on how costly and how more remote it is from the major cities that the hubs are in. And so this is a huge profit center for all the carriers out there. And they all copy each other per se, but these are just, look at the increases. These have been going up for the last 5 years from nothing to $4 to $16 on these delivery area surcharges, or more remote zip code fees is what they are. So then you've got things like the oversized charges. They're going up $25 every year. You're seeing oversized fees going up. I mean, and that's not a mistake there. You see that ground unauthorized, like an oversized package charge? About 10 years ago, it was $50. If you ship like something like longer than golf clubs and something that's a little more ugly, and you ship that, and it's longer than golf clubs, though, but they're going to charge you $1,475 for every package that you ship that's an unauthorized, non-conveyable package. So be careful what you're shipping. They've got a lot of things put in place here that are very, very, I would say, penalties if you ship the wrong things, and it's a real profit center for them on a lot of these other ones here. So
Interesting.
This is the new norm. And by the way, this used to happen just once a year. The rate increases were in January. They were announced in early October for all the shippers in America. Here's your new rates. You can create your budgets. You can expect these to be there. The last few years coming out of COVID here, that's been not the norm. The new norm is 3, 4, 5 new accessorials being introduced mid-year. You may not even know what's happening, and if you're not paying attention to all the press releases and the announcements from the carriers about a new rate change or a new accessorial fee that's just been introduced, you need to look at how that impacts you and your shipping to get the data, the stuff data you guys store and the data you have in your system. Look at it and see how it's going to impact you for the rest of the year or going forward for your budget. But this is the biggest, most dramatic things we're seeing is the accessorial onslaught is not going away. It's huge. There's over 100 of them. And this now is over 50% of your entire parcel bill. So it isn't the base rates. All these together are a huge factor, way over 50%.
Yeah, that's huge impact. So what's interesting, Mike and Joy, about what Mike just said is if you sort of come back out of it a little bit. So we had a session on mitigation of cost increase, especially, Mike, we've been talking lately a lot about the price increases that are going on in the entire transportation market. Obviously, a lot of it driven by capacity, lack of capacity and more demand than capacity. But what you're calling out here is an extreme case of looking at the total cost from freight, fuel, and other charges, and saying the skew in all modes of transport tends to be some percentage of total, right? In other words, every mode has some level of non-freight, non-fuel charge, but in this case, it's really gotten to the point where it's shifted and balanced to be more so than some of the other modes, right? And if you don't have the data at the charge level to know the frequency and understanding of all these things, then you can't properly mitigate them either through changing your execution or through a contractual agreement. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, and that's what we do as a company, Steve. You know, we help people mitigate all these ongoing changes and new rate increases. So we're always out there helping people with benchmarking and pricing evaluations and contract reviews and figuring out, hey, what is the market doing today? Should you be paying full price on a fuel surcharge or those DAS charges? Are they negotiable? What is negotiable? Is it half off? Is it 25% off? That is so important to your audience today to know what is the market, how can they save money, and not just sit there and take these rate increases, but really evaluate them, analyze them, look at all the options. And this is part of your flexibility, agility, is what are you doing as a shipper today? You need to be aware of what's going on in the market, not just carrier-wise, not just service-wise, price-wise. All three of those are important in your decision-making process. So that's one thing that we've been doing for 34 years is helping people evaluate the market, benchmark the contracts in the market today. If you do that right, you can really mitigate these annual general rate increases and these accessorial fees and this onslaught of just unknowns. So and getting data, it's all about data. If you got the data and you know how many shipments you're doing that are going residential or how many are going to a certain zip code that are the $16 DAS zip codes, you may want to focus on a negotiation with a carrier and focus on those based on the data. So, I mean, I know you guys provide good data to people and that's exciting, but that data is a starting point for any benchmarking exercise.
Right. No, I think you're right. It comes back to our original theme, and we still have a way to go. We're always promoting these concepts with customers and ensuring they leverage their data asset. And I've used terms like operationalizing it, meaning not a one-time look. It needs to be in a regular cadence of review and monitoring to ensure that things don't deviate from plan, because that's the other thing, as you mentioned, things change, right? They don't even change once a year. They could change mid-year, mid-quarter, whatever. And so the ongoing monitoring and deviation of these changes are really critical. So really good points made there. You know, Joy, I'm thinking that the message around agility, data, and navigating this kind of changed, and now Mike's kind of given us a view of a market that's probably less covered by general supply chain, because they like to talk about ocean air freight all the time and truckload, but this parcel market is huge. Mike, real quick, just with Joy and I have talked about the increase in demand of e-commerce and this whole third-party billing. You got influencers on social media. You've got product being sold and marketed in all these different ways, and everybody wants in on it, right? But it's all about, it's usually small package related, right? Because it's e-commerce, right? It's small orders. Can you comment at all? I know this is kind of a curveball, but I mean, e-commerce is here to stay, right? It's only growing, and with all this dynamic AI influenced marketing, if you will. How do companies navigate their e-commerce strategies given all this change in the market of how people buy goods? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I mean, the retail footprint of the brick and mortar has changed forever. Ever since COVID has made, whether you're a senior or a young person or whoever you are, you're now more used to ordering online. It's exploded the market for e-commerce type companies. So I think if you're going to even have a future in your retail, you better have an e-commerce platform and be able to deliver your goods online and make it easy and accessible and look to reduce your shipping costs. But that's the way of the future. We have a lot of big retailers, the big brands you see at the mall, or any mall you go to, they all have an e-commerce platform now. They all have multi-carrier shipping solutions. They give you, how do you want this? Do you want this 5 to 7 days? You want it 2 to 5, or do you want an overnight delivery? They give you all these options. And with those options requires shipping platforms that are flexible, have agility, and they're based on be it price or service. Every one of these e-commerce companies are the same. I went online to order some football kicking tees for I'm coaching now, and I ordered some holding tees, and you had Dick's Sporting Goods, you had Walmart, you had 20 choices out there. Who's the fastest delivery? This is just 2 days ago, and I looked at the cost, the delivery part. I always like to look at that. And so these companies need to make sure that they're being visible on price, service-wise, if you're going to be successful in the e-commerce area. But everybody, Steve, is getting into it. I think it's the way of the future. You must have an e-commerce platform. But with that, like I mentioned earlier in the show here, you have all these last mile delivery partners that are, they're on Amazon, they're on Spotify, they're on all these different platforms shipping. So you need to, and TikTok, all those. So you need to pay attention which ones you're going to use. Maybe use multiple ones. You got to have multiple carriers so customers have choice. And you want to negotiate with your carriers, even all those regionals and those last mile delivery companies and the post office. They're all negotiable. And a lot of companies, you don't want to put your full rates on there because they're going to bounce from your website, your e-commerce platform to another, because the same products are being sold almost identically on a different platform, a different company. So you got to make sure you're getting the best pricing because shipping's right on there, and service, like we talked earlier. Right. So this is important if you're an e-commerce company or getting into that space, but it is the wave of the future, and keeping your shipping costs as low as possible. And that's real important. And that's why when we help people who have an e-commerce company, like one of the biggest toy retailers, wanted to go from one single carrier to 4 or 5. They want to use the post office. They want to use last mile delivery. They want to use a couple of the nationals. They wanted a multi-carrier solution, so their e-commerce platform had flexibility. They just rolled it out. They tested it for a few months, and now they're live going into peak season. So they were smart. They did it earlier this year, but companies are going to be doing that more and more. So
that's great insight, Mike. Joy, yeah, I mean, that's really, really a great focus on a market that we tend to ignore, I guess is a way to say it. We haven't really talked about it, and now we have a good insight into how all this impacts a market that, again, we'll call small package, less than 150, less than 70 kg, with multiple providers for last mile delivery, and probably, Mike, fair to say the highest cost per unit weight of all modes of transport.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, they don't, I've talked to a lot of companies that are saying, well, I spend 50 million in ocean and 40 million in truckload. I only spend 4 or 5 million in parcel. It's nothing, I don't really worry about that. boy, you better, because these prices are changing. They're going through the roof, and sitting there and putting that in the back burner, your parcel costs, your parcel contracts, you need to evaluate them, do your benchmarking, and that is so critical now because it is the most expensive mode of transportation anywhere right now. And as you saw on my slide earlier, it's getting worse. More accessorial fees, Steve,
Right.
higher general rate increases, multiple rate increases per year, and the contracts are complicated. So, I mean, if any of your shippers and need help, we're here to help. If anything we can do to help you with pricing, let us know.
Thanks, Mike. Joy,
That's
there
great.
you go.
Well, that's you kind of used my call to action for me, Mike. So wonderful. Thank you for doing my job. We've got in the chat, this was fantastic, guys. I think, tons of useful insights and things that people can walk away with. So we'll make sure everyone has links for the replay, links for downloading this month's Freight Market Report, which again, will feature kind of a special call out from Mike and his team. And then we'll also drop in the comments ways that you can get in touch, learn more about AFMS, learn more about Mike's work and his team's work, and ways that he supports those kinds of organizations.
Yeah, this is great. I'm going to be a constant viewer of your show here, Steve. I think you guys got a lot of content, and so
it's all joy.
Thank you
for MC.
One
I'm
viewer.
really happy to be invited today and add some commentary here. So thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. It was great insight into, like I said, we typically don't go deep into a single modality, and it was really, really insightful what you provided today. So thank you very much. And I'm sure our viewers thank you as well.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, guys. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next month.
Okay.